Two of the most talked about shows of the year premiering the same week: She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon. We've got a few other shows to talk about as well in there. Let's talk TV. Hey guys, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to TV News and Reviews for the week. It is rare that we have two huge shows premiering right around the same time, but within days of each other. We had the latest from Marvel, which is She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, and then the latest from the Game of Thrones, George R.R. Martin world, a prequel to Game of Thrones called House of the Dragon. So we're going to talk about both of those this week. We also have a few other shows to discuss, including 3 imports from other countries. The CW really looking to pad out their end of summer slate. So we've got a couple of shows from them, and then also Apple TV Plus, 2 new shows on there, and one of those is in fact an import, and the other one is just an American tween type of series. So we'll talk about all of that, but first, of course, it is news time. We've got a lot of news to discuss, and in fact, House of the Dragon is going to be the first thing. So I think last week we talked about the premiere numbers for House of the Dragon. Huge for HBO, 9.9 million watched just that first night on all the different platforms. But in renewal news, House of the Dragon has already been greenlit for a second season, and as a matter of fact, if you take just the entire first week into account, those ratings went up to 20 million people. And that's huge in this day and age, even if you factor in a week of delayed viewing. Even the biggest shows like This Is Us or maybe NCIS or Grey's Anatomy or something on a broadcast network only get about 15 to 17 maybe million, and that's with a week of delayed viewing. So 20 million is incredible, but it's no surprise. Everybody loves the Game of Thrones and that world and George R.R. Martin, so it makes sense that a lot of people would at least be checking this out. Now, how did it fare with them? Are they going to return for subsequent episodes? That obviously remains to be seen, but certainly enough people checked out the premiere to make it worth renewing it for a second season. And many shows ending that I have news for. In the Netflix world, Resident Evil is done after 1 season. No big loss there. It was not very good. And then The Umbrella Academy has been renewed for a 4th and final season. So that will be ending with season 4 on Netflix. Over on E, we've got Daily Pop and Nightly Pop to end in September and October, respectively. These are entertainment news programs, I guess, and they Daily Pop started 5 years ago, and Nightly Pop a year later. They're going to be replaced with a new evening-only news show on E as part of a larger restructuring. A lot of cable companies now really struggling to figure out what their identity is going to be. In this sort of new world, a lot of the ones owned by companies that have streamers. We've talked about this with like TBS and TNT and stuff. Warner owns those, and I guess now Warner Discovery, whatever they're called now, owns all of that. So they're really shifting all of their focus onto HBO Max and really sort of, deleting a lot of shows that have already been filmed or have been announced or have been renewed or whatever. And so E, I think, is figuring out what to do. They lost the Kardashians, of course. They're on Hulu now, which, I would never give them the time of day, but obviously that's a very popular program. Keeping Up with the Kardashians was, and now their new show is on Hulu and not on E. So, I think it's a time of change for E, so it makes sense to sort of get rid of some of the longer-term shows there. All right, in casting news, a lot of really cool stuff to talk about. Let's talk about the things I don't really watch with people leaving in terms of casting news. So Kelly Giddish is departing Law & Order SVU midway through the upcoming season after 12 years on the show. Now, if somebody's departing in the middle of the season, I always think, okay, there's obviously some drama there. I read a little bit into it. Yeah, she had some issues, I guess, with some of the producers and the showrunner and stuff. So makes sense, I guess, that she would be on her way out. But yeah, 12 years on any show is incredible. Of course, that's only half the time that SVU has been on the air, but Also, Barbie Ferreira, who plays Kat Hernandez on Euphoria. She is leaving after the first couple of seasons. She recently appeared in Apple Plus's The After Party and also the new Jordan Peele movie, Nope. So you may have seen her. You know, I don't watch Euphoria, but when I pulled up a picture, I definitely recognized her. But she is done after a couple of seasons on Euphoria. And then in joining TV show news in casting, Paul Rudd is going to join season 3 of Only Murders in the Building. I don't want to give spoilers for season 2, but I learned about this, and we might have even talked about this last week, but that's before I watched the season 2 episodes. I binged the whole thing over like 3 days last week, and I won't say anything that really happens in it, but I learned the news about Paul Rudd before I watched the finale, so I'm wondering how they're going to put him in there, but we'll see. Joe Pesci is going to join Pete Davidson and Edie Falco for this new TV show, Bupkis, that we've talked about a few times over on Peacock. This is Pesci's first regular series role since the mid-'80s, before he was really that famous. He was in this short-lived detective dramedy called Half Nelson. I think it was maybe on ABC. But he was sort of retired. You know, he did The Irishman a few years ago and then sort of, didn't want to do anything else. But look, you know, Lorne Michaels comes calling, and you usually say yes. So, he's producing this program. So, look, I don't know. I'm intrigued to see what Pete Davidson's deal is after he leaves SNL. I think his talent is limited. But in the right project, I think he can do well. And this apparently is some sort of, Curb Your Enthusiasm type thing where he's playing, I think, some sort of, heightened version of himself, which is not that dissimilar, I guess, from the King of Staten Island. So, which you played that pretty well. Okay, and some more exciting news. Tig Notaro joins season 3 of The Morning Show. We already announced Jon Hamm is going to be on that. I am loving this show. I thought season 2 was even better than season 1. And now one of my favorite comics, Tig, is on, and I love Jon Hamm as well. So very, very excited for season 3 of The Morning Show. And then finally, Jeffrey Dean Morgan joins season 4 of The Boys. Sort of a supernatural kind of reunion, because Jensen Ackles had joined in season 3. Morgan was the father on Supernatural for the first couple of years, I guess. And he is, of course, best known, I guess, now as Negan in The Walking Dead. I first noticed him in Grey's Anatomy way back in the day. Denny, whatever his last name was, I forget now. But, that's in the couple-year period where I was, like, watching Grey's every week and talking about it with everybody. So, all right, in some announced programs, NBC is going to produce a Dolly Parton Mountain Magic Christmas, which will be around, obviously, Christmas time. It will feature Dolly Parton herself, Jimmy Fallon, Miley and Billy Ray Cyrus, Tom Everett Scott, Anna Gasteyer, Willie Nelson, and more. Dolly is almost synonymous with Christmas these days. She has many Christmas albums. She did that Christmas movie for Netflix a couple of years ago, so should be a fun one. And then Ewan McGregor is going to star in a show called A Gentleman in Moscow for Showtime. If you're not in the U.S., it's going to be on Paramount Plus for you guys worldwide. But in the U.S., it's going to be on Showtime. He's going to play Count Alexander Rostov, who in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution finds that his gilded past places him on the wrong side of history. And he is going to executive produce that as well. It is based on a novel. And, definitely risky to do stuff about Russian people in this day and age, but it sounds like he's sort of going to be the villain, maybe, so, makes sense to do that. I'm a Ewan McGregor fan, so we'll see where that goes. All right, in odds and ends news, Law & Order, speaking of which, we'll have a 3-episode crossover for their 3 Thursday shows, Law & Order, the regular, and then SVU, and then Organized Crime for the season premieres, which is coming September 22nd. This is a first for this particular group, but not for producer Dick Wolf, who has done it with FBI. He has 3 FBI shows on CBS, and then he has 3 Chicago shows on NBC, and they've done a couple of different crossovers with those. Chicago Wednesdays, they call it. A lot of NBC news here, so buckle up. Peacock is going to start streaming NBC programs next day instead of Hulu. This is going to start in just a few weeks, September 19th. Comcast, who owns NBC and owns Peacock, is on track to divest its 1/3 stake in Hulu. Disney has the controlling stake in Hulu, and, you know, look, it makes sense with everybody else doing their own platforms. Originally, because you had CBS All Access for the last 5 or 6 years, Hulu was the home to see all of the next day shows on NBC, ABC, and Fox, but not, and I guess maybe the CW as well, I don't really know, but not CBS. Famously, you could not get CBS shows on Hulu next day, and I think that led to CBS leading the ratings for so long, because people, if they wanted to see, you know, Young Sheldon or last couple seasons of Big Bang Theory or whatever, had to really watch it, you know, every week live, or, you know, pay for CBS All Access, which very few people were doing. But the great thing about Hulu is it had, like, other than CBS, it had all the big networks. But now, with everybody sort of divesting into their own streaming services, some things will be lost. And that kind of sucks. I mean, I have Peacock, but, you know, it makes Hulu, I think, a little less valuable to not have those NBC shows on there. But NBC's really looking at rearranging things in the industry, because they are also potentially gutting an hour of prime time as early as fall 2023. Prime time has traditionally been, since the mid-70s, I would say, which pretty much is my whole life, 7 to 11 on Sundays, and then 8 to 11 every other day of the week. Now, Fox has done it a little bit differently. They've never had a 10 p.m. hour, except they tried it for like a year on Sundays in the early 90s. The CW has never had a 10 o'clock hour, neither has WB or the UPN before it. So, you know, they are going to basically, if this goes through, they're going to revert that hour back to local affiliates, which likely will have them doing news programs, which means they could move up the Tonight Show to 11 o'clock instead of 11:35. So instead of going head-to-head directly with Kimmel and Colbert, they would be moved up a half hour and go head-to-head, I guess, with The Daily Show, but not like the big heavy hitter. So very, very interesting theory. Certainly they would have to break up their Law and Order and Chicago nights, where there's 3 hours of dramas right in a row with the common theme. They would have to do something with that. But, you know, in the early stages of the thought process, but look, I'm actually, if I'm being honest, I'm all for less TV right now, because there's just so much on. I'm still watching things from 2 years ago that I'm catching up on. And so I'm actually fine with that if they want to do that. All right. Apple TV is going all in on kids programming with new seasons of Ghost Rider, Wolf Boy, and Hello Jack, as well as 4 new children and or family shows, and 8 older Peanuts specials making their debut on the streamer in just a couple months. And why this is interesting is that this is in stark contrast to what some of the other streamers are doing. HBO Max, we talked about this last week, canceling or removing dozens of different kids shows from the streamer there. And Netflix also scrapped plans for a few shows and let go some 70 people in their animation division. So, and I've always said it, really ever since Apple TV Plus went on the air, or whatever, started existing, whatever you want to call it, I have always said that their children's programming is second to none. They have the best shows. Now, of course, that was before Disney Plus went on the air. I suppose most of the Disney programming is for kids, if you don't count like the Marvel stuff, I guess. I mean, that's more for all ages and stuff, but they swear a little bit and there's some violence, whatever. So I would say like specific kids and family programming. Yeah, I guess Disney Plus has a slight edge because of the brand name, but in terms of, you know, things from sort of all over the place, I really think Apple TV has the best slate there of kid shows. So no surprise there. All right, the Video Music Awards were this week. I'm not going to go over them because who cares, really? I haven't watched MTV in like a decade. But in a turnaround from most other award shows, they actually went up 3% in viewership from last year. Now, they air the thing on literally like 12 different channels. Basically, anything Paramount owns, they air it on. So it's on MTV, but it's also on VH1, Comedy Central, the Paramount Network, Nick at Night, TV Land, BET. Like, it's on so many networks, but still, they did that last year too. So, you know, it's still up. And then also, this is interesting with the VMAs. It recorded 40 million social interactions the night of, which outpaced the Oscars, and for the second year in a row, outpaced the Super Bowl, which is interesting, especially because last year the Super Bowl had the the Dr. Dre and Eminem, you know, they had more of a sort of youth-based halftime show. I mean, I know those guys are all in their 50s and stuff now, but it's not like it's The Who or Bruce Springsteen or something. It's, you know, something that my generation and younger sort of is more in tune with. So it's very interesting that the VMAs are still creating that kind of a buzz. And then finally, in reboots and spinoffs, Gladiators, which is the UK version of American Gladiators that aired over there from 92 to 2000. That is coming back in 2023. They're going to air that on BBC One. And I assume if you have BBC America or you have BritBox as a streamer, you'll be able to watch that on there. But all right, enough of the news because we have two huge shows to talk about. And let's start with She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. Yes, I understand House of the Dragon is, you know, more popular with the views and stuff, and all of that. But for me personally, you know, the Marvel stuff, I think I'm a little more in tune with than the Game of Thrones world. So we're going to start with She-Hulk, Attorney at Law. So this is the latest, obviously, in the Marvel line of shows on Disney+. I lost count. This might be the 7th show they've done. Maybe 6th, I don't know. But anyway, they've done a lot of them. And this is the latest. This follows Jennifer Walters, who is played by Tatiana Maslany from Orphan Black. And she is a lawyer specializing in cases involving superhumans because she turns into a Hulk in the first couple of scenes there. She becomes She-Hulk. She is the cousin of Bruce Banner, and I won't really go into the details of what happens. You can watch the first episode for yourself and find out. But Mark Ruffalo, you know, little spoiler, I guess, for the first episode, is in it as Bruce Banner and the Hulk. And, you know, he's sort of training her on how to be a Hulk and that sort of thing. And this is an interesting one because they really, I will admit, all of the Disney Plus Marvel shows, at least the last few, have been very, very different from your typical, you know, like Falcon and Winter Soldier, for example, or even Loki was unique enough, but it still sort of went to those same wells. Of course, Loki's a character we knew before, which is nice, but for the origin stories anyway, a lot of them are fairly similar, like in the movies, and I find that, what is it, Phase 4 that we're in now, is movie-wise very, very poor. I would say the 2 or 3 worst Marvel movies have been in this current phase, or at least the worst one. I would say the worst 2 or 3. I'm going to stand by that statement, because I didn't like the last Thor movie. I hated the Eternals. Didn't really like Doctor Strange 2. But on the TV side, I think there are, you know, some really interesting things going on. The last few shows I've really enjoyed. You know, Hawkeye I never did finish, but that first couple of episodes, you know, I liked those. And then Moon Knight, that's a little more of a basic origin story, but I liked it. And then Ms. Marvel, have to finish that, but I loved that first episode or 2 that I watched. And then now we've got She-Hulk. Well, by the time this is up, there'll be 3 episodes up, but I watched the first 2. And each one is, you know, sort of a little bit different. Ms. Marvel was more of the high school version, which, yeah, they kind of did that with the Spider-Man, Tom Holland stuff, but in a show form, you know, and something a little bit different because she's not white and she's not a dude, and so that's a little different. And then here we have what is sort of an attempt at an Ally McBeal style sort of dramedy. I always say Ally McBeal sort of coined that phrase, dramedy. That's the first time I heard it anyway. You know, the media was all over because they didn't know what to do with it because it was clearly funny, but it was an hour-long show, so they were like, well, it's not a comedy, but it's not a drama, it's both. Let's call it a dramedy. And so, you know, I think we've sort of used that term for a lot of shows since, you know, especially in the non-laugh track type age that we're in. But this is clearly a nod and a wink to that show specifically because she was a lawyer. I think those comparisons make sense there. And she speaks to the camera here. And there's definitely some, like, interesting kind of wink-wink, fourth-wall breaking moments, including, like, the first time that Jennifer speaks to the camera, she, like, is herself even taken aback that that happened. So it's just things like that. Or, you know, for example, there's a part where I can't get into the storylines without being spoilery, but something happens where they're referring to the old Ed Norton movie of the Hulk, where he was the Hulk in, what, 2008 or something like that. And she asks Bruce, what he thinks of it or whatever. To not give spoilers, I won't go into detail, but he basically, says, oh, you know what, I'm a different person now than I was then. Literally, wink, wink. Like, is there a little too much of that kind of stuff going on? Yeah, maybe, but I have to say, I didn't watch Orphan Black, but I have been fascinated by Maslany's career, just because I know in Orphan Black she's playing like a ton of different roles, like a few dozen roles, right? And here, obviously, she has to play really, I would say 2 to 3, because she is, Jennifer, but then she's also She-Hulk, which is basically just Jennifer, but green. She's still the same size. And then she is She-Hulk on top of that, where she actually hulks out. So, and again, I can't get into the details, but it's interesting. I think she's really playing 3 different characters here, as the Jennifer character. So it's very interesting. I guess maybe they're sort of working toward a World War Hulk movie, is what I've read. I don't know if that's a comic book or if people are just calling it that or what. But that's sort of where all these are going. Like, Ms. Marvel's going to lead into the next Captain America movie called Captain Marvel, rather, called The Marvels. And so a lot of these movies are going to lead into whatever the next films are going to be. So yeah, sure. Give us a World War Hulk, because I like Mark Ruffalo as Bruce Banner. Look, in this first episode where she is sort of learning her powers and stuff, is it a little ridiculous that, things come way too easily for her? Sure. But look, this is like a 35-minute show. I don't think we necessarily need to have her, doing a training montage for 20 minutes. We can get it. And all right, great. She's powerful. I know a lot of people in certain groups are saying, like, oh, well, why? Of course she knows what she's doing. She's a female version of the Hulk, and this show is, too this or too that or whatever, too feminist, too woke. Look, I don't curse on this channel, but, people can kiss a certain thing with that logic. I think this is a great show. It's a lot of fun. Is it as good out of the gate as Ms. Marvel? It's not. I will admit that. But I like the sense of humor it's got. I was a big Ally McBeal fan, so I like the nods to McBeal and that kind of stuff. So for now, this is definitely one of the better of the Marvel shows. My grade could improve upon the, finale of the season, but I really, really got a kick out of this show. I'm going to leave She-Hulk Attorney at Law with an A-. All right, next we will talk about House of the Dragon. So here's the deal. I've never watched Game of Thrones. I've never seen a moment of the show. But of course, it was huge. It aired up until 2019. And there are a ton of shows on the way in this universe. So this, just like that show, is based on the novels of George R.R. Martin. The Song of Ice and Fire, or whatever, is the name of the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle. So this is set 200 years before the events of Game of Thrones, which is why I decided to take a look at it, because I read some articles just asking the question, if you never saw Game of Thrones, like, will you be able to get this show? Will you be able to understand it? And then I asked a couple of my friends that saw it, and everything said yes. It's a prequel. Yes, it might help if you know a little bit. And here's the thing. I do know a little bit. I subscribed to Entertainment Weekly for many, 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 many years. Ever since 1990, really. So I always, have sort of known what was going on peripherally in Game of Thrones. I don't necessarily know, who died when or whatever, but I know sort of the families, and one of the big families is the Targaryens, and this is the events basically leading up to the big Targaryen war, which is called Dance of the Dragon. So this is really sort of about the uprising. I don't know if that's the right word, but the the Targaryens basically getting their foothold in, and set in the lineage of, the Targaryen family that people know from Game of Thrones. One of the other things I know about Game of Thrones is that the dragons didn't come in for a little while. From what I understand, people thought dragons were extinct in this show, and then all of a sudden, I don't know when, maybe in season 2 or something, we got a lot of dragons. Here, they waste no time with the dragons. We see a lot of dragons right away. Look, here's the bottom line on this show. I'm not going to keep watching this show. This really is not for me. It doesn't necessarily make me want to watch Game of Thrones, but it's clear why people like this stuff. It is so well done. Visually, it's astounding. I love the music. Game of Thrones was certainly known for its big score, its big booming score. And, it is here on display. Every scene is punctuated by this incredible score. The actors who I don't really know, except for Matt Smith, and I didn't really watch Doctor Who, so I don't even really know him. From that, I just know he was one of the doctors. But, these other people, Emma Darcy, Patty Considine, Rhys Ifans, I've heard of him. I'm sure I've seen him in things. Eve Best, Steve Toussaint. They're, I would assume, mostly sort of more British actors or whatever that don't do a lot of American stuff. So, sure. But they are really, really good. Everybody's doing a great job here. Could I follow everything? For the most part, yeah. I mean, I don't think I was that lost. And here's, the thing I think that is great about that. Yeah, look, if you watched Game of Thrones and you're super invested in, all of that stuff, I'm sure there are plenty of Easter eggs in this show that would go over my head that I didn't catch. But here's the thing. We are in, the era of peak television. There's so much to watch. I say it all the time. I said it earlier in this video. I'm constantly behind on my shows, right? So the idea of a new show set in the same universe as one of the, real popular shows. But okay, look, not everybody watched it. Not everybody has HBO or did at the time. That was a pay channel. I never had it growing up. So until I got HBO Max, I never had HBO. So it didn't stop me from watching Game of Thrones. I could have watched that, on DVD or whatever. But point being, there's also a whole new generation of people that weren't really watching TV like this when the original Game of Thrones was out. My nephew was 17 when the original Game of Thrones was on. He was like 10 or 9 or something. He wasn't going to watch that. So, or maybe he was even younger than that. I guess 2011. Yeah, he was like 6. So, but here's a show where if you missed Game of Thrones, whether you never had interest, you never had HBO, whatever the story is, you don't have to go back and watch dozens and dozens and dozens of hours of television. You can just jump right in. And if this is something that appeals to you, the dragons, the fighting, the medieval stuff, if that appeals to you, you're going to love this. And if you're a huge Game of Thrones fans, you're going to love this. Like, this is a well-done show from top to bottom, for sure. Again, I'm not going to continue watching it. It's not really my thing. There's so many other things that I'm behind on that I really want to catch up with. But I am glad that I watched this episode because I can at least say, I get it. I understand, the hype about Game of Thrones. I understand why people love it. And I guess George R. Martin is an executive producer of this show too, right? So it has his, stamp of approval on it. And he's a co-creator of it too, I guess, because it's based on his books. It's based, specifically, it says on Fire and Blood. So I don't know if that's a specific book in the novel series. But anyway, look, I'm going to handicap it a little bit because a small part of my grade is my own personal enjoyment of something. And, I didn't love it as much as some people will. But there's no doubt that this is a well-crafted show. It is going to be great and loved by the people who are into this stuff. I leave House of the Dragon with an A-. All right, so let's get to, we'll do these last 4 pretty quickly because I know those were some long reviews there. But Leonardo is next because it is also a period piece. This one is over on the CW, and this was taken from an Italian television station and France, I guess, as well. It's partially done by Freddie Highmore's company called Alfresco Pictures. He has a supporting role in this program, and it is basically about Leonardo da Vinci's life through his works, you know, his famous paintings, and also through some of the stories and the drama behind the scenes with the people in the paintings or the making of the paintings or whatever. And slowly we reveal, you know, some things about this man's life. All right. Now, I watched House of the Dragon after this. But this is the reason I decided to do this one first of the others in the TV news and reviews this week, is because I think it dovetails very nicely with House of the Dragon, because you've got this like top tier program up here, right? And then this thing is such a piece of garbage. Like, it's poorly put together, for one thing. The script is bad. You know, the acting is, I would say, subpar. I wouldn't say it's terrible, but I would say it's definitely below average. But I never bought that the lead actor was Leonardo da Vinci, which is played by Aidan Turner here, who I'm not really familiar with. Apparently he was in the Hobbit movie series as some, you know, minor character. But he is god-awful in the role. He's, you know, when I say everybody is subpar or below average, I would say he's actually the worst, because I didn't believe for a second that he was Leonardo da Vinci. It just, in my mind, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I know they're calling him Leonardo and he's got a paintbrush, but it's like, it's just, I don't buy it at all. It's very soapy. I could tell why the CW picked this one up, because it's very, very corny, very soapy. There's no supernatural elements to it, but things are going on that are not at all, from my understanding, historical. So if you're looking for something with a little bit of some sort of accuracy or anything, like, I don't even know if any of these other people existed. Like, it is so poorly constructed. And when you stack it next to the House of the Dragon, it's like, what a pale imitation. This takes place in the 1500s, so like, it's, I don't know when House of the Dragon takes place, probably before that even, probably a few centuries before that or whatever, but, you know, point being, you know, very, very, you know, old period pieces with castles and all of this kind of, and this just looks like garbage compared to it. So I leave Leonardo with an F. It's bad. It's one of the worst things I've seen this year, for sure. All right, so then also on the CW, they have acquired an Australian comedy show, but more of a dramedy. We'll use that term again, because I think there's definitely some dramatic things happening, but it is set in a high school in Sydney, and this gal, Ollie, who has, you know, really high hopes for the future. She's got a great grade point average, you know, big achiever here, but she is pregnant, didn't know it, and has a baby in the first couple of scenes of the show. And, you know, then from there, she has to figure out what she is doing with her life, what her family is going to do, what the father is going to do, what all the people in her life are going to figure out, you know, as we move forward. And because of that, I think this one definitely belongs on the CW, because it is about, you know, a young woman. It's about current issues of the day. And we know that the typical CW viewer is, you know, maybe a little bit younger, skewing in age. They're into the sort of, you know, the DC stuff, the supernatural kind of stuff. I think this fits in to the point of, like, I understand why they're running it. The acting here is decent, but I think more than that, it's interesting just to kind of see the trouble that, you know, this gal is in now, and especially with things going on in our country. I don't know what they do in Australia, but, you know, here in this country, obviously, there's a lot of hot button issues with unwanted pregnancies or whatever, but she didn't have the chance to talk about that because she didn't know she was pregnant. So all of a sudden, she is thrust, you know, on with a little baby, and her whole life is upended. What does she do? And I think there's some interesting questions here that are answered sometimes in movies like Juno, for example, or some of the ones that came out in the last couple of years. Plan B is one of them. But, you know, in an hour and 45-minute movie, a lot of times we don't get to necessarily dive in, and this show is doing that. And I think as the episodes go on, we're going to find out more and more, about how this is changing her life. And I hope that we look at it, for the better. But I think there's going to be a lot of tumultuous times here. Yeah, there's some comedy along the way because life is funny like that. And this is definitely a realistic type of show. But yeah, that's where it shines for me. The acting's fine. I wouldn't say it's, above and beyond here, but it's more in, the script and the premise, that I really, really like about this show. So I'm going to give Bump a B. All right, then we will go over to Apple TV Plus for our last two shows. And since we're on acquired shows, let's talk about the import Bad Sisters. This is from Ireland, and it was created and stars Sharon Horgan, who I know from this really great movie called Let's Talk About Jamie or something. Now I forget what it's called. Oh, Everybody's Talking About Jamie. That's what it is. And I've seen, some of the songs from that many, many, many times over. I really like the music in that. But she played the teacher in that. And so when this came up, I was like, oh, that's Teach from the Jamie movie. But so this is set in both London and Dublin. And it's based on another series from years ago. But basically, the premise is that these sisters have a death in the family. One of the sisters' husband dies. And at first they think, okay, no big deal. We're going to bury him. End of story. Let's move on with our lives. But then the insurance company gets involved. And then some stories about what's really been going on with the sisters and with the deceased, who is played in flashbacks by, let's see here, if I could even find his name. Is it Brian Gleason, maybe? Anyway, it's so hard to tell sometimes on these websites. But anyway, we see him sort of in flashback form or whatever, or really not even. We just, yes, sometimes, but also we're sort of unraveling things from discussions that the sisters are having, or things that the insurance company is looking at. And it turns out this guy might have actually been a bit of a prick, and maybe more than a little bit too. So we're sort of diving into that. And this is also, I guess, a dramedy, because there are some moments of dark comedy and sort of like, dark things. But as slice of life things go, the way it's presented is a little bit of like sort of uncomfortable comedy sort of thing. And so I guess you could call this a dramedy as well. But this one I think is, has got really great writing, really sharp, really smart writing too, because it ends up, as we're going on, I'm through the first two episodes, it gets more and more mysterious as to what's going on. Like the first episode, I didn't really think much was up at all. I thought, okay, this is maybe a show about these sisters bonding or something, and I think that's going to be part of it, but it's more about this sort of mystery as we go along, and what happened to this dude, and how people really felt about him, and unraveling some truths. And so I'm really enjoying this. Apple Plus, they usually do it. Kid shows, adult shows, they usually bring the goods, and this is no exception. I leave Bad Sisters with a B+. All right, finally we have Surfside Girls. This is an American show. It is on Apple TV Plus, and it is also involving a mystery. It is more of a tween show, I would say. The appropriate age would maybe be like 11 to 15 or something like that. And it's based on these graphic novels, and it follows a couple of best friends who find a ghost in their summer, beach town. So they try to uncover this mystery involving a pirate ship and a cursed treasure and this and that and the other thing. So look, there's exceptions to every rule. This show is not great compared to some of the other Apple TV stuff. Compared to other shows, it's okay. And the acting is a little bit less than what I would like to see. This is acting to me that is more a little bit akin to like Disney Channel original shows and that sort of thing. It's fine, but, I wouldn't say that these guys are going to get some awards anytime soon. And then to top it off, the mystery so far is, I would say, less than compelling. I watched this right after Bad Sisters, which, has crackling scripts and, really the mystery element, keeps building and building. Here they sort of show their hand a bit early, and then it's like, okay, let's figure out who this Ghost was, and let's find the pirate treasure. It's like, all right, well, we did this with Goonies, 30 years ago, or whatever. So, so to me, it was definitely underwhelming for an Apple TV Plus show. For any other show, I found it to be just kind of middling. So I will leave Surfside Girls with a C. All right. I told you those last two we need to dwell on because we really tackled the She-Hulk and the House of the Dragon very, very well and in depth. So next week, I know we've got the new Wrexham show, the sort of docudrama with Rob McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, where they buy the soccer team, and it goes from there. So interested in that. I'm not positive what else is coming up, but we're wrapping up summer here pretty soon, so there may be a couple of shows that fell through the cracks this summer that I would like to still get to, that maybe we'll do in sort of a wrap-up in a couple of weeks, because the week of, like, September 17th or somewhere in there, the fall schedules are going to premiere for the broadcast networks. And we don't have a ton of new shows this week, or this season, rather, but there's enough that for a couple of weeks we'll be tackling those. So, all right, join me next week, won't you, for another TV news and reviews. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.